Okay, so I'm going to go over just a quick review of some of the FlexView functionality in order to get you guys started so that you can start creating and working with FlexViews and testing the different options that we have. So again, this is going to be a limited video. I'm not going to go into all of the details about all of the different FlexView options, but I'm just going to hit the core pieces of FlexView. So first thing that I want to do is I'm going to open up just a regular computational view. And here I've got this computational view. I've got my dimension buttons and everything. And if I want to create this or convert this to a flex view, I'll go to my control view ribbon and there's a new flex option here. So I'll click on that flex option and now it's taken that view, it's converted it to a flex view. And now if I want to save it, I can go ahead and click on View, Save As for all users. I'll just give it a new name. So I'll call this Sample Flex View. Click on OK. And so now I've created this flex view and it's called Sample Flex View. I'm just going to go ahead, I'm going to close it and then reopen it so we can see it here. So I created it and I called it SCA Sample Flex View. So here we go. I'll go ahead and open it up again. And when I open it, you'll notice that it's defined as a flex view. It doesn't have the dimension buttons. I cannot rotate this dimension around, or my dimensions around in the view. So it's kind of static in that way. However, I do have all of the, I have similar functionality with a regular view. For example, I can scale my data. So maybe I want to take the scaling factor off. I can also change the currency. The currency works here. If I want to do an expand multi-page, I could do that as well. I have that functionality. If I go to the control navigator ribbon, if I want to pick a different page member, right now it's on total company, I can click on the page or the select page command, and then I can pick a different page member and the view updates for me that way. Okay, so I'm just gonna save the selections that I have here. I'll go back to the factor and put that in as 1,000. And I'll go ahead and save the changes I've made. So I'll go View, Save for all users. Okay. So what a flex view does is it converts the view into this flex view, and in every single cell, it creates a flex ID or a function, a flex function. And if I want to see the flex IDs, I can go to the control navigator or to the control view ribbon and click on the show flex IDs button, and that shows me the flex ID. So in this particular cell, this is using a data function, and it's similar. The syntax is similar to a control reference function. The first parameter references the model and the view, and with the flex IDs, we've elected to use an asterisk, so it saves space in this function. But it's so when an asterisk is referenced, it's using the primary view for this function. And in this case, it's using the SCA sample flex view. And then there's a separate parameter for each dimension within the model. If one of the dimensions is on the filter's edge, then it won't be displayed in the function here. It won't be one of the parameters. Okay, so if the dimension is on the filter's edge, then it will be omitted from the function. If I want to see this flex ID displayed in different formats, I can do that using the drop down here. I can see the absolute value, and all that does is it converts that other format, and it displays each value, resolved value for each of the dimensions. So in this case, it's referencing the forecast scenario, the total company, the FTE account, and January 2018. Okay, and there's other options here. Typically, you won't use these other options. The one that you'll use probably 99% of the time is the understandable flex ID, because that's the one that's going to be used in the flex task pane, which we'll get to here in a moment. So the one that you'll use the most is show the understandable flex ID. Okay. All right, and so to not show those, I'll click on that button again. And so now let's go ahead, let's open up the Flex pane. So if I go to the Control Navigator ribbon, I click on Flex pane, then that's going to display or open up the Flex pane that shows me all of the information about that Flex function that I'm on within that cell. So let's just take a look at this Flex task pane. Up on the top, it displays the Flex ID or the Flex function for that specific cell. So the cell is B12, and I see that for B12, and then it displays that Flex function or that entire Flex ID for me. And then down below, there's the different arguments for that Flex function. So here is the specifier. Again, the asterisk means it's using the default or the primary view for this Flex view. And then it will give me an argument for each one of my dimensions. Now the arguments are defined based on a reference type. And you can have there's multiple reference types depending on the Flex function that you're defining. So these are all of the reference types related to the data Flex function. Okay, and so I'm just going to take a minute to just review some of these different reference types. By default, the view relative reference type is used in the data Flex function. And the view relative, what that defines is, you'll notice the syntax here, C0, which references column 0, and R0 here references row 0, and P0 and P0 and so on. So if I look at that information over here, the view relative position is it's saying use the column header for that cell, and then use the row header for that cell, and use the page members for that relative to that cell. You'll notice if I click over onto cell C12 and I look at that definition, it's also defined with the arguments set to 0, because it's the column relative to that cell, the row relative to that cell, and the pages relative to that cell. Okay, so to see how that could be different, let me go back to my cell B12, and if I select my time period dimension, if I were to edit this property from 0 to 1, and I click on apply down below, notice the data value now references the time period that's offset by 1. So instead of using the relative position of that column, it's now offsetting the column by a value of 1. So now it's returning the information for February instead of January. let me go ahead and set that back to 0. Okay, so view relative is the default option. It's the default reference type for the data function, and it's the one that I think will be most commonly used. Now let's take a look at some of the other ones. If we want to, we could choose absolute, and that's where you can make a selection of the available members within that dimension defined in the view. So for example, maybe I don't want this to be January. I want to hard code it to be for the full year. So I could select the full year. Now that's selecting the data value for the full year. I can see that if I scroll over. Here's my full year value. And so that's showing me the full year value. So the absolute reference type is where I'm just defining or I'm selecting a specific member and hard coding that value in that function or in that argument. Okay, another option is branch relative, and branch relative is kind of similar to absolute, but it's I'm referencing the relative member within the branch. So in this example here, if I pick May, I'm referencing the 5th time member within the branch of the view. So the 5th time member of the branch is May in this case. So I can see that the data value is set to 178, which is the same as May's value. Okay, so the branch relative looks at the relative position of the branch or of the member within that branch. So now let's change the option to, let's go to indirect. So if I choose indirect, I can reference the time period based on the value of the time period in a different cell within the view. So in this example, maybe I want to reference the time period from August. So I'll go ahead and click on my button here. Then I can reference August and click on OK. And I'll click on Apply. And now you'll notice that I'm referencing the time period from August over here. And so it's returning that August value because I've referenced the August time period. Okay, so the indirect will reference the value from a different cell within that flex view. Okay, so now let's say, let's just say I had at the top of my view here, I had a value for, let's say, 2018 04. So let's say within my flex view, I have this value that's in my view. And then over here, what I want to do is maybe I want to reference that value in the worksheet. So I'll choose the reference type for worksheet. And it's kind of similar to the indirect. I'll click on the button here and I'll reference that cell. I click on OK. So now, and then click on Apply down here. So now it's referencing that as my time period. And so since it's referencing April, I can see that it's returning April's data for me. Okay. And then the last reference type here is the keyword. And actually, to show you the keyword reference, this is a bug here. It should give me a list of my available keywords. I could also type the keyword in up here as, for example, if I want current month, I'll type in current_month. And if I click on apply, then my current month in this application is March, and so I can see that it's returning March's data for me. Okay. Now again, there's a bug here. This should display a list of the keywords. So let me just go ahead and close this view. Oops. And I'll go ahead and reopen it. Okay, so if I go back here and I choose keyword, then it gives me a list of keywords that I can select from down here. So maybe in this case, I'll pick current year and click on apply. And now you can see it retrieves that year value over here in the cell. Okay, so there's different reference types, and the reference types are different based on the function that's being used. So for the data function, these are all the different reference types that you can select from. If I'm looking at branch data, then that branch data function has different reference types. So here for the dimension parameter, the different reference types are absolute, worksheet, or keyword. If I go to property, I have my absolute options are defined here, or I also have worksheet and keyword. And for members, for my member argument, I've got absolute, or I have access to branch relative, worksheet, indirect, and keyword. Okay, so again, the number of reference types that you can choose from depends on the flex function that is being defined, okay, as well as the argument. Okay, so let me go to a different part. Okay, so one thing I wanted to show also is on the task pane here. So let's say I've, maybe I selected the current year in this case here. If I want to see what the resolved values are for each of these arguments, so maybe I want to know, well, what scenario is this picking? Which department, which account, and which time period is defined here? I mean, obviously I could go out and look at the view and I can see, the account here and time and so on. But if I go to the tab down here for resolve, I can see this flex function with its resolved arguments. So I can see the scenario that's being used, I can see the department that's being used, the account, and the time period. So this gives me the resolved value of this flex function. Okay, and then it shows me the resolve formula here as well. Okay. All right, so up to this point, all I've been doing is defining the information for a particular cell. And also one thing to keep in mind, when I've selected this one cell, and I select a dimension here, that reference type is applied to only the selected dimension that I've chosen here. So when I change this reference type to be something different, it's not updating these other dimensions, okay? It's only updating the one dimension that I've selected, okay? So if I pick branch relative or whatever, and again, there's a bug here, it's not displaying that. This reference type is being defined for the selected dimension. So let me go ahead, I'm going to close this view again and reopen it. So there was a change that occurred last night because these options were all working yesterday. So anyhow, what I want to show you now is how I can select a range of cells and update the entire range at the same time. So right now, I've selected this range in column B, and I'll go over here and I'll select my time period again, and I'll choose the, let's say I choose the indirect method, and then I'll go ahead and select, say, July 18. Now, what I want to do is, since I'm defining an entire range, I want that reference to be an absolute reference here. So I'm going to use my F4 key and make that absolute, so that as that reference gets copied down, it's not going to be defined for G11 here and then G12, G13, G14, and so on. I want it all referenced on that one header cell. So I'm going to click on OK here, having that set to be absolute. I'll apply that to the whole range. So now you'll notice if I click on any of these other cells, that time period is defined, and it's based on that absolute cell reference to G11. Okay, I can see that going all the way down here. Okay, and it's the same thing. If I had that formula up, or if I put in a value here, let's say 2018. Oops. 2018. So now I'm going to define this range again, but watch what happens. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to say worksheet, and I'll go and select the worksheet reference. Now notice I'm not going to make this absolute, so you can see what happens. If I apply that, now notice I get all of these bad index errors, because what it's doing is it's now referencing G2, right? In G2, there's nothing there. Okay, and it goes all the way down. This one references something because it's referencing G11, and G11 has a time period there. Okay, so when you make these definitions for based on worksheet or indirect, it's important that you define the cell reference as either being absolute or relative, depending on how you set up your view. Again, I'll set that, apply it. Now that cell is being referenced. That absolute cell reference is being referenced. Okay, so when I, sorry about that. When I click on one of the, the cells within the flex view, you'll notice that I have a flex function. So it's either data or it's branch, or up here it could be header data. Okay, so I've got header data information, and here I've got more header data information and all that. If I click on a blank cell, something outside of that view area, you'll notice it gives me, in the task pane here, it gives me a list of the available functions that I could add something into a blank cell. Okay, so let's say maybe instead of this being just a hard-coded value here, maybe I want to insert the current month keyword in here. Okay, so I'll go ahead, I'll delete that value, and notice these bad index now because it was referencing the value in there. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to make this a keyword reference. So I'm going to go ahead and click on, double click on keyword. So that gives me the keyword function, and then I'll go ahead and I'll select my current month, and I'll apply that to the cell. And so now that gives me the keyword value for the current month. Now you'll notice I removed all those bad indexes because now I'm referencing a valid time period within the view. Okay, So again, if I click on a blank cell somewhere, it will give me a list of available flex functions that I can include in my view. Now, I'm not going to take the time right now to go through all of these different options with you. How they are available in the documentation, so you can go and take a look at these different functions here within the documentation. All right, so one of the nice things about Flex Views is that you can insert columns and rows wherever you want to. You can also copy and paste information. So here I'll copy, let's say I want to copy this information, and I'll paste it down here. And maybe I want to take these columns here, copy and paste that information down here. And you'll notice that as I do that, it is actually copying all of the flex functions for me for those various cells, okay? And all of, oops, didn't want to do that. So let me close out here. It's a bug. And you'll come across that while you're doing some testing here. So I just want to make sure that my engine and everything is closed, make sure the software is closed before I reopen it. Okay, so I'll go ahead and log back in. And I'll go back down and find my sample Flex View. Open that up. Okay, so as I was mentioning earlier, I can take information, copy and paste it wherever I want to in the worksheet. Okay, if I want to take this, and I want to put this, copy and paste that over here. I can do that. I can put in any Excel formulas that I want to. So let's just say I want to do this divided by 2. So I can put information in wherever I want to. If I want to remove information, I can do that as well. Say I want to delete that. Maybe I want to insert a column here. Maybe I want to insert a row here. And maybe I want to have, I don't know, maybe I want to insert a chart for this information. I can go ahead and insert a chart. Okay. And let's say I want to save this as a different view. So I'll go here and go view save as. I'll call this flex view, sample flex view number 2. Okay. So I'm able to, copy and paste information from within this flex view. I could also go out and open up a different flex view. So here I'm going to go out and open up this revenue flex view here. Well, let me open up this revenue view. So here, this revenue view, I'm going to just go ahead and flex this. And so now I can take this flex information. So I'm going to take that revenue, and so I got gross sales and units and net revenue. So I'll just copy that information, bring it over here, and I can put that anywhere I want to on this worksheet. So I have this information, and maybe I want to, there's my gross, and maybe I want units over here. So let me go ahead and just insert some rows. Hold on. Go here and insert, shift cells to the right. Take this, cut it, paste it. Okay, so now I've got it in a different order and whatever, and I can format this, do whatever I want to with it, and when I want to, I can go ahead and save that. Okay, so just to show you real quickly some things, some nice little reports I created. To show you this variance report that I did. So here I have a view that has a custom dimension in it that shows me my variances. So here's my standard, computational view, and it gives me my month-to-date information and variances here, and then it gives me my year-to-date variances here. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a report, one that looked a little prettier and everything, but I wanted to be able to display my year-to-date information underneath my monthly information, or my month-to-date information. So what I did was I created a flex view out of this, and then I just copied my year-to-date information down below, referenced my accounts as well, and then prettied up the report, reformatted it and everything. So let me show you the result, what I did. So if I look at my report here, so this is what the report looks like. And so you'll notice I just copied that year-to-date information down below, and then I inserted, ancillary columns and rows in here, put some charts in it, and so now this is my flex view. So this is the kind of stuff that you can do with the flex view, which is really nice. And let's see, one last thing I do want to show you is partial IDs of flex IDs. So let me go back to my sample. Where is that? So, let's say I've got my flex pane, or I'm sorry, I don't have my flex pane. Let's say I am showing my flex IDs, and I want to be able to update the time period definition, let's say, having to go through each one of these formulas and try to pick out the time period can be kind of, challenging. So one thing that I can do is when I have the option turn on to show the flex IDs, if I enable the flex pane, notice I now have a checkbox next to each of my dimensions. And if I click on the checkbox for time period, it limits the formula or the flex ID here to only display information for that one dimension. If I go ahead and select scenario, now it displays information for the scenario and time period. So you can use this option to be able to visually see the information for a particular dimension. And then you can make a quick data change here also. So here, for example, I'll select this range and I'll do a Control H, a find and replace, and I'll find anything that's 0 and offset it to a value of 1, replace all, and close all that. And now if I don't show the flex IDs, now you'll notice that it's all referencing the data that's in February because I offset the time period by 1 month. So that's another feature that you can leverage. You can show the flex IDs and then limit the dimensions that are being displayed so you can make a quick update to any of the flex IDs within the worksheet here. Okay. All right, so hopefully that's given you enough information for you to get grounded and start running with this so that you can start doing some testing and find bugs like we found earlier today. Okay.